Welcome back to FASTSIB's Academic Job Search Series. This is the pre-workshop recording for part two, your application materials. Let's start my timer here. Okay, so in the first part of the workshop, part one, we really talked about finding open positions that are right for you and evaluating your skill sets and understanding your readiness for the faculty position. Part two now is really all about the application process. And then part three, of course, we'll talk about interviewing and negotiating a job offer. But really the goal of this part of the workshop is to put together strong materials to get you an interview. And first thing we want to talk about is the fact that when you prepare for this process, it's a long process. And so you are encouraged to apply early. So if you are looking at a job description that says that the applications are due October 15th, and it's August 1st, go ahead and get your materials ready and get it in as early as you can. The earlier you get your application in, the earlier the search committee is going to review it, the more time they're going to have to look at it, and the faster they might get back to you to schedule an interview. This was, as it is an example of a faculty job search for Dr. van der Heijden, and they applied with their first application in September, and they were invited to their first interview in the end of October. They had other Zoom interview invites. Their first chalk talk was in December. Their last job talk was in March for the different positions they applied for, and they were getting offers in April. So you can really expect that this is going to take a long time from when you begin getting your materials out to when you might be interviewing to when you might get a particular offer. And you can expect it to take throughout the fall months and into winter, and then certainly there'll be a bit of a pause around the holidays at the end of the year. When you're putting together your materials, the first thing that we wanted to do is kind of talk about a few myths that you might have encountered before or heard about when it comes to competitiveness of the types of applications. So there was a recent study looking at interviewing faculty members of faculty search committees at different institutions and trying to identify the things that they're looking for in their candidates. Certainly for faculty positions with a bit of research or a lot of research, the research proposal is really important to their perspective on whether or not a researcher is qualified. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that those individuals have to have a K-99 or have had prior funding to be competitive. In fact, for a lot of the majority of faculty, the importance of it is not nearly as high as it is on the strength of the research proposal. And in fact, in some importance of having postdoc fellowships or graduate fellowships, again, are not necessarily indicative that you are going to be given a job offer or that you won't get one if you don't have these things. This is also true about the impact factor of the journal as well as the type of journal. So one myth is that you have to have Cell Nature science papers to get a faculty position, and that is just not true. And certainly, another factor of importance isn't necessarily that the PI's mentorship or the reputation of the lab are coming from. It's really about what you've done in the work that you've done as a postdoc and what you're proposing to do when you're there as a faculty member. And certainly there is a high level of value in preprints. So even if you don't have a paper fully published yet from your postdoctoral work, getting it out there on bioRxiv or medRxiv or arXiv can really help promote the fact that you've done a lot of work as a postdoc and that there is a lot of skills for you to showcase through those preprints. When the faculty members of these search committees were asked, what information do you wish more candidates knew when they submit their application? Research proposal, collegiality, and chalk talk were kind of the three largest words that were pulled out of those interviews. Your research proposal, your research strategy, particularly for research-focused roles, is going to be really important and essential. And on the flip side, if you're looking at just a purely teaching role, your teaching proposal and your teaching experience is also going to weigh that heavily on those faculty search committees. But certainly collegiality. These search committees are also looking for someone that not only can do a great job, but is going to be a good colleague, is going to be someone that's going to be supportive of the department and someone that they're going to want to work with and collaborate with in the future. So again, just to kind of really dispel some of these common myths, you don't need, so again, one of the myths, you need a K99 R00 to obtain a faculty position. This was a review done a couple of years ago of incoming assistant professors in neuroscience across the United States, and a vast majority of them had no funding coming with them at all, or had had no history of having any funding prior. And so, the myth that you have to have research funding to be competitive is just a myth. You can be very competitive if you have a great research proposal and you have a clear vision for what you're going to do when you become a faculty member in that department. And same is true about having had an F-32 or a postdoctoral fellowship. A vast majority of those in neuroscience in 2022, or I'm sorry, in 2020, did not have any incoming funding, as well as the combination of having no funding and no first author paper in Cell, Science, or Nature. Showing you're productive is important as a postdoc or as an advanced graduate student. But again, a majority of those in the applicant pool don't have funding, don't necessarily have a CSN paper, and are going to still be very competitive. And this is looking at neuroscience in particular, but the idea here is that this is likely representative of a lot of other fields in STEM, particularly in biomedical research. And the other myth, too, is that you've had to have dozens of first author papers to be considered for a faculty role. And this is also a myth. In fact, when faculty on search committees were interviewed, and then when their statistics have been looked at of incoming faculty members in the early 2020s, what we find is that the median number of first author papers during a postdoc is 1 to 2. And the average total first author publications for postdocs and graduate students is about 5, with the majority being around 4 to 6. So again, you have to show productivity as a graduate student, as a postdoc, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have 15 papers or 12 papers. Just showing that you have taken a research project to fruition, to completion, and published something about it is going to be more important than necessarily just saying you have a ton of author credits. So, in part one of the workshop, we really looked at the big three responsibilities. Just as a reminder, that's research, that's service, and teaching. I'm going to go back to this job description. And one thing that's really important is no matter what applying position you're applying for, you really want to use the job description as your lantern to guide you through this process. And it's going to really spell out specifically the types of things that they're looking for in their candidates, and also the types of things then that you would want to talk about specifically in your teaching statements or your research statements. So again, for this role at the University of Pennsylvania, they're looking for someone that has expertise in advanced genomics and super resolution imaging techniques. You would almost without a doubt need to highlight these things in your research strategy and an understanding of the interplay between epigenetics and tumor initiation and progression. So again, these are things that you would want to speak about. They might even be part of your research vision, but this is the type of role and the type of expertise that this department is hiring at the moment. As well, these other responsibilities, developing collaboration, independent research programs, finding NIH funding and leadership in writing grants, reports, and manuscripts. Those are things that you're going to want to touch upon in your research strategy. And we'll talk about the research strategy in a few minutes. But again, how are you going to develop? Who are you going to develop those collaborations with in the department or in the international field? Those are things that you should talk about in your research strategy to strengthen not only the strategy itself, but show the faculty search committee how you fit into the department, how you might be as a colleague, and the type of leadership in the field that you're going to be bringing with you. So again, most applications for a faculty position are going to really have these six items, and then there could be more. A CV, a cover letter, a research and teaching statement. A lot of universities have pivoted away from diversity statements, and they now call them service statements. Some of the universities, particularly in certain states, have eliminated these completely, and then references. So we'll talk about each of these components in greater detail. So the CV. You're probably all familiar with the CV, but again, the curriculum vitae is really an overview in a living document that provides a detailed overview of your research path and career. It will have your contact information, your education and position history. It will outline your research experience and projects, all of them, whether or not they're talked about in your research strategy, your teaching experience, your any leadership roles, your publications and thought leadership. What have you published? What have you spoke about? What were your contributions? And it is it's a large document. It's not like a resume that's a page or two. This document is expected to be multi-pages. At your stage in your career as a postdoc or a graduate student, not necessarily going to be 10 pages long, but there'll probably be, a couple pages associated with this. A great example, by the way, is NIH's OITE CV and Resume Guide that's linked here. That will give you a very granular level of detail on each of these sections. But some strategies and tips we have is that you should tailor it to the role. If you are applying for a teaching intensive role, your teaching experience should probably start up on the first page. If you're applying for a research related role, highlighting your grant experience or highlighting your technical skill sets and research near the first two pages is going to be really important. Um, and for any faculty role, highlighting grant experience, regardless of the success, just showing that you know how to write a grant, that maybe you've submitted a grant before, whether you've been a co-writer or the co-PI, doesn't necessarily matter, but just showing that you understand the process is going to be really important to showing that you're going to be able to generate revenue for the department when you're applying. Service and volunteer work. It can give insight into what you'll be doing as a faculty member to help support the department and support the greater community that you'll be joining. Certainly highlighting any awards or presentations of note. Again, considering this as a living document is going to be really important. Document should be updated every year, putting in speaking engagements, putting in different types of opportunities that you might be a part of so that you never lose out on that experience in communicating it. It should be easy to read and understand, and it shouldn't necessarily be just full of all kinds of different fonts and sizes and colors. Keep it simple, straightforward, and easy to see. Make it as easy as possible, like a grant, for the search committee member to look at it and really understand your research path. The research statement is probably the most, or is not probably, is the most important part of an application, particularly for a research intensive role. And it really should tell your story. This is not necessarily a grant application where you're just going to detail out all the technical details of a project you have in mind. You really need to tell a story to the search committee that you are the right person to do this work and that that's the right environment for you to do the work in. So, what skills do you have that you would be bringing with you, and how will that lead to your success as a researcher, but also the success of working with your colleagues in the department? You need to lay out what are your long-term goals? What's your central hypothesis? What's the big picture? Why should the search committee care that they're going to be hiring a faculty member doing the project that you want to do? What is the impact, or what types of gaps will you be solving? And then certainly, what are your short-term goals? Showcasing your independence from your postdoctoral mentor. What does your first year look like when you're starting up your laboratory? And what is your funding plan? These are big questions that need to be answered. If you don't answer all these questions or most of them, the faculty search committee is either going to really question whether or not you're prepared to be able to run an independent lab, but they are also going to focus on that if you're interviewing. Um, from that paper, thoughts from the search committee, I pulled out a few quotes here. I won't go over each one. You can read them on the slides that are provided in the pre-workshop materials. But again, they want to know individuals who understand the strengths and weaknesses of their proposal and a sense of where the field is headed and that vision. Can you articulate the importance of your work to a group of members that are going to be in your department who may understand that work a little bit or who may not understand? But they want to get excited about it. They want to bring in a colleague that they know is going to be someone that's going to make an impact where they are. So some additional strategies, anywhere you can highlight innovation or novelty, how to expand the expertise of the department. How do you see yourself fitting in? Who could you collaborate with in the department? Who would you collaborate with nationally or internationally? You don't have to show all of your preliminary data, so use figures and tables strategically. Give an overview of where you see your research going. Give an overview of what types of grants and opportunities you might apply for. If the job description is vague, look for vision or mission statements on the department website that you can highlight. Does the department really care about AI and rigorous research? Those are things that you might be able to sprinkle into your research strategy, particularly if they are relevant to the work you're doing. And have this reviewed by multiple colleagues. Get input from members of your community, collaborators, others in your department that can give you a sense of, are your ideas being communicated effectively? And again, just some quotes from the search committee from this paper, looking for someone that's collaborative, someone that really can, make things very clear, someone who's going to show that they can be productive, and someone who shows that they have a vision for the future. The funding in the future, the resource needs in the future, someone that's really thinking about this strategically. Now, the teaching statement is similar in that you're going to want to outline your experience. So as opposed to your experience in the classroom. Where are you an instructor on record? Have you developed courses, built your own syllabus? Do you have experience with in-person, hybrid, or remote teaching? Do you have a particular teaching philosophy or style that you like to use in the classroom? Particularly for teaching emphasis faculty roles, this is going to be really important. This also is, why do you want to teach? What is it that drives you about teaching? Do you like teaching a lot of students or just a couple students? How will you keep those students engaged? That is a really tough question that faculty ask right now, is how are they keeping their students engaged in the classroom? Have you done any assessments? And of course, what can you teach? This is really important because you can search the course catalogs of any department that you might be joining. Identify, can you jump right in and take on a topic that maybe is of need in that course catalog for the department? Can you develop a new course that opens up the possibilities for the students taking programming in that department? It shows not only how you fit in with your other colleagues, but it also shows you've done your homework and shows that you have effectively done some research on the institution you're applying to and understand really well how you're going to fit in. The cover letter can be really important because it really is a brief overview of who you are and why you're interested in the role. Keep it tight, 1, 2 pages at the most. Highlight one or two key components, particularly if those scientific components really hammer on whatever is identified in the job description, any specific accomplishments that are really important. If you have a K99, for example, as a Mosaic scholar, that is something that you should absolutely talk about in your cover letter. So that's very obvious to anyone reading any application materials of yours that you have this grant or that you have worked on this type of grant. Do you know someone in the institute or department that you collaborate with? Again, tailor it to the job posting and really avoid excessive detail or technical jargon. This is really meant to whet the appetite, get those members of the search committee really interested in who you are so that they turn that page and they dive deeper into the materials that you've provided. So again, do you know about so for example, do you know about the faculty at Brown and how they would fit in? What might you contribute right away to the department? Who can you collaborate with? Who might you be able to work with immediately? So again, highlighting people you know or people you might be able to work with in the department gets them interested right away and gets the faculty members of that search committee intrigued enough to go into the deeper dive of your materials. Now, some schools may require a diversity or service statement. Certainly, that is a period. This is something that is going through a lot of transition right now, given the current administration and funding environments. But you could expect to talk about this in any type of interview is, again, what are you going to do to support the next generation of researchers? How has your experience influenced your ability to mentor students from all kinds of backgrounds? Or how are you going to use your experience to promote their scholarship? And that's really what these statements are about, is how are you going to bring your experiences and talents to the current environment at that institution and create a focus on the future? How will you foster a safe, inclusive space? How have your experience shaped your ideas? So the service statement, the teaching statement isn't necessarily just a statement on everything you've done in the past to support, say, DEI initiatives or to support volunteering at scientific nonprofits. It's really meant to talk about how are you going to use those experiences to create opportunity and create more collaboration and more inclusivity in the new department. So again, you're going to probably have to get a feel for what state you're in and what is the state of the administration when it comes to their support or not support of these types of initiatives. But you should feel and be prepared to talk about them either in the application or during the interview process. And certainly your references, individuals who can speak about the scientists you currently are going to be very important, and individuals who can speak about the science you're going to be doing. So again, those that can highlight your research independence or familiarity with research funding are going to be important. If you know that there's a point of concern with your application, maybe having a reference that can be able to reference that. Strong letters are going to be really important. Tepid letters are really viewed negatively by search committees. So if you have a letter recommendation from someone that's a big name in your department, but they don't know anything about you, that's going to be immediately obvious by the search committees, and it is going to count against you. And again, anytime the letter can highlight your potential to acquire funding, produce leading science and scholarship, all of those things are going to strengthen your application and get you that interview. So to conclude this part, these are some additional resources that do a deeper dive into some of the different aspects of the application we've talked about. Certainly, next live workshop, that will be March 25th, 2026 at noon. We can do a Q&A on any of the material presented here. And then we're going to do a deeper dive on strengthening your research statements. So there's an accompanying anatomy of a strong research statement worksheet that's part of the pre-workshop materials that you have access to. Please read through that, come with any questions, and then we're going to do an actual live activity where we're going to look at research statements and summary statements and see how we can punch them up. And hopefully then that inspires you to be able to be a thorough editor of your own work. And then we will invite a current Mosaic Fellow that's part of the cohort here at FACID to come and talk about their faculty search process. These are Mosaic Fellows that have recently started as assistant professors and have the kind of the freshest insight into how to land a faculty position. So again, thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you.